always know you could feel beauty rising.
Hi, my name is Sue Skasky with Vermont Volunteer Services for Animals Humane Society, and welcome to our show For the Animals. Today, which is a continuation of today, this is part 2 of a show on healing herbs with Sylvia Newberry. It was so fascinating. When we were recording, we had only gotten through part of the material, so Sylvia graciously agreed to stay and to continue the conversation. Sylvia has been on the show a few times already. We had the good fortune to meet over the passing of a dear friend, Angela Day, who died in February, and Sylvia came and did Reiki on her that day. Sylvia was a nurse at Mount Ascutney in the operating room for 35 years, and she really knows her stuff. So we welcome her back, and thank you. Let's continue exactly where we left off. We were talking about different herbs, and we just finished with how some herbs affect people differently, and we were talking about sleep. A couple of our people have asked about how to have a more restful sleep to get through the first REM cycle without waking up, and you had talked about lavender.
Well, lavender is probably the best known sleep herb, or one of the, I mean, that's its traditional use. It's traditionally known as a relaxing herb. But there's a certain class of people who will have exactly the opposite effect, and there's not always a way to do that without trial and to figure that out without trial and error, unless somebody just tells you they really don't like the smell of lavender. I would never recommend using lavender as a sleep remedy if you can't stand the smell of lavender. That's a good indication it's not for you.
Would you spray your pillow with it? Would you take flowers next to you? Would you do a little sachet? Until
you know that it's really going to work, I would do something that can be reversed. You don't want to spend the whole night on a lavender scented pillow if lavender is keeping you awake. So creating a little, we call them sleep pillows. Just take a couple little pieces of fabric. There's no exact way to do it. Sew them up on 3 sides and put some dried herbs inside of them, and then finish sewing them up. And you can stick them inside your pillowcase. You can lay them beside you on the bed. I find that I often put mine over on my bedstand beside me. I can still smell it over there, but I don't want the real concentrated. So you can do a myriad of things. There's so many ways that you can apply the herbs. You can make a bath. You can soak your feet in a lavender foot bath before you go to bed. You can take a whole body bath. You can take an old sock and put some dried lavender blossoms in it and tie a knot in the top of it and throw it into the bathtub when the water's running. And the essence of the lavender infuses into the water, and you're absorbing it through your skin, you're absorbing it through your respirations, you're surrounded by lavender.
I know you mentioned that you have a garden, that you grow a lot of these yourself, but how would I find, if I wanted to find different herbs or flowers, where would I go?
A good place to buy herbs here in the Upper Valley is at the Upper Valley Food Co-op. They carry an abundance of a wide variety of herbs, and if you can't find them there, they will order them for you, as long as you don't mind buying a huge amount. I have a supplier. If someone wants to know a good place where they can buy small amounts of high-quality herbs, they should use the contact information that I think is streaming across the bottom of the screen, a phone number where they can call and leave a question for me. There are several sources that I use. I order through the internet, but there is one supplier in particular that will allow you to buy very small amounts. It's sort of traditional to say 4 ounces is the smallest amount that you can buy. 4 ounces of dried herb is a lot of dried herb, especially if you get it and find that you can't tolerate the scent of it. So this other vendor will sell you an ounce of it You can buy just a little pinch of it to try. But you'll find it farmers markets. There are a lot of people that grow herbs that will be selling them at farmers markets. If you grow them in your own garden, it's not a big job to dry them, and it's not expensive. It's not really labor intensive. And if you're doing a supply of herbs just for yourself and for your family, you really don't need jar after jar after jar of lavender blossoms. So it's they're all around us.
So at your Healing Arts Clinic,
Yes.
In Windsor,
Yes.
could somebody just walk in, or do you need an appointment? I'm not quite sure how it's set up.
If you want to work with me or with any of the other practitioners individually, you need an appointment. There is, however, a display of some very basic herbal remedies, and among those herbal remedies are sleep pillows. They not just lavender. There's a combination of herbs in them, but My primary goal is not to not to go into manufacturing of herbal remedies. I would rather teach people to make their own, but sometimes you need to see what it looks like and give it a try before you want to make that commitment that you're going to do it.
You had told me about a workshop on aromatherapy that you attended one day years ago, and there was a nurse sitting next to you in your conversation. Would you talk about that now?
Yeah, we were discussing aromatherapy and sort of talking about our experiences with them, and she said when she was a nursing student that she was required to do a project in microbiology, and so she decided that this was a traditional nursing, regular Western allopathic medicine, do an experiment using essential oils, looking at trying to demonstrate the bacterial, the antimicrobial benefits of properties of essential oils. Because almost any essential oil has those properties. They will kill bacteria, and some of them will kill viruses. But anyway, she was going to demonstrate this, and so she went and talked to the person who was in charge of the lab, and they agreed to do the same thing that they would do if they were testing antibiotic sensitivities. They had an agar plate that had a certain kind of bacteria growing on it, and you take a little disc of paper and saturate it with in this case, the essential oil, and put it in and put the cover on the plate and put it in the incubator, and then hours later or the next day you come back, and if it's an antibiotic disc, you look for a ring around that disc that doesn't have any growth of bacteria, but the bacteria is other places in the disc. And so they did, I'm not sure what oils they chose, but they planted the essential oils in the disc and put them back in the incubator, and she came back the next day and there was no growth anywhere in the plate. And they repeated it. They couldn't believe that the person in the lab said he had never seen it. He said, that's enough to make me believe in God. I've never seen anything be this effective. Working in a very different way. The other benefit to essential oils is that antibiotics don't become resistant to them. We have all of this problem today with resistance to antibiotics, and they don't become resistant to essential oils. There's something about the natural.
I was just going to say the word natural.
Right, and they can be used the same ones can be used over and over. And there's been a lot of study, again, primarily in England, about certain specific essential oils that are effective against certain specific bacteria, including the MRSA that we struggle so with in our country.
You know, my brother-in-law is living in Sweden, and he sent an article to me about the same subject. Only at that time they didn't know it was bacterial related. In a village, people were getting sick. They were dying left and right. And one household got the sickness, but they survived. And they had found the reason why, and I don't know if I've told you this, but they took a raw onion, cut it in half, and put it next to the bed at night. And what they found was that the onion absorbed the impurities, And that's why another thing, you're not supposed to ever leave an onion out and then use it. You're supposed to use it and finish with it or refrigerate it. But along those same lines, yeah.
Well, there's a lot of things, and in all of my explorations into alternative therapies, I have found over and over again that many of the things that I was taught as a nurse, many of the things that we believe in medicine and in healthcare and in our everyday lives simply don't hold true when you explore the different possibilities.
Well, do you have any stories from your experience using herbs that, you know, proved successful when perhaps allopathic medicines had been unsuccessful?
Yeah, I do. I have a number of them, but one that comes to mind was one that really impressed me. I was in the process of doing Rosemary's apprenticeship, Rosemary Gladstar's apprenticeship
In Berry
at the time, and I had a young woman call me. She lived up about an hour and a half away from where I live, but we had a mutual friend, and she'd heard that I was studying herbs, and so she called me sort of in desperation. She had had hives for 6 months. She had had big, itchy, red welts that never went away. She had been seen by allergists, she'd been seen by endocrinologists, she had had prescriptions stacked, a foot high for antihistamines. I don't know how, when she told me what she was taking, I don't know how she stood up and drove a car and went to work. Just nothing had any effect on it. She just continued to have these big, itchy welts. And we had been studying herbs that affect the liver, and we'd been talking about doing liver cleanses, and Rosemary had said that one of the bases for allergies is the fact that the liver is not functioning efficiently. It's not, it's clogged up, we've overburdened it, it's not, food is not being able to be digested cleanly, and so there's a lot of waste stuff that's floating around in our bodies that we react to as allergens. And so I said, this is going to sound crazy, do what you want, but this would be my recommendation, and it's relatively safe. It's not, you may be uncomfortable, but it's not going to hurt you. And I told her how to mix up a blend of raw garlic and lemon juice and olive oil.
Sounds good to me.
And I said to her, you want to do this on a night where you have no social things planned, and probably nothing planned the next morning either, because you're going to reek of garlic. But, mix this up and make it a consistency that you can drink it, and drink it. Sip it over time or chug it down or whatever, but get the volume in that I recommended to you. And so she did, and she did it relatively close to the time that she went to bed, and she went to bed and she slept, and she got up the next morning and she said, I vomited like I have never vomited in my life. She said, I thought my toenails were going to come out. I did it over and over again, and when I stopped, I realized how good I felt. And the welts were gone.
Really? The hives?
Yes. And they never came back.
It's very interesting.
And so we suggested to her that as a way to support her liver, she make friends with raw garlic and olive oil and lemon juice. Sprinkle it over your vegetables, use it as a base for your salad dressings, dip your bread in it, whatever, but incorporate those elements into your everyday diet as a way to support your liver and to keep it clean and to avoid the antihistamines and the itching.
My sister-in-law, Christina, in Sweden, and her brother Will, her husband Will, are very knowledgeable about cleansing, and different, also root vegetables are very important in their diet. But like you said, matching what is in your area to what your health requires. Very interesting, though. Do you have any other stories like that?
I can tell you a story about healing a very impressive laceration using herbs and essential oils that my husband gives me a fair amount of practice in herbs over the years, and a number of years ago he...
You mean in Reasons 2?
In Reasons 2, yeah. He cut his finger. he sliced from the tip of his finger down the side to his first knuckle and laid that flap of skin right back. He was out in a pond in a boat cutting cattails and called to me and came in the boat with the blood running down his arm and saying as he stepped on dry land, "And I'm not going to the hospital." And I'm thinking, okay, we're not going to the hospital, so what are we going to do? And on my way into the house, I ran through my herb garden and picked things here, there, and everywhere that I knew had properties that I was looking for, brought them into the house, threw them into a coffee mug and poured some hot water into them, and then went into the bathroom to see what the damage really was. And it was as bad as I thought it was. And so we cleaned it out. I poured tea tree, essential oil of tea tree into it directly, because that's antimicrobial and it won't damage the tissue, but it will prevent the infection. And I made up a poultice of the herbs that were in there, and we wrapped his finger in that. There was yarrow in it, and yarrow is magnificent at stopping bleeding, and so the bleeding stopped, the yarrow, the flower, and the leaves.
Okay.
There's an essential oil that could be used, but you can use the whole plant. You can use it fresh. You can keep it on your shelf dry and use it powdered. It also has antimicrobial effects to it. And there were several other herbs. And we made a poultice and bandaged it on it and left it for the afternoon. It had stopped bleeding. That night, I looked at it and went, oh my goodness, how am I going to explain to the doctors in the emergency room why I didn't bring him in before? Because the flap was all swollen. It looked like somebody injected it full of water, and it was sort of sticking out to the side of the finger, and it was like, okay. And he's saying, I'm not going to the emergency room.
There you go. He said he wasn't going.
So we put some of my homemade salve on it. I have a salve that I made, and we bandaged it, and he went to bed. I also changed the herbs that we soaked it in. I added calendula to it to draw some of that fluid out of it.
Calendula, is that a plant?
Calendula is a pot marigold. It's an orange, almost looks like a daisy. It's an annual, but it will self-seed like crazy in your garden. Okay. It's poor man's, what's the Indian herb that is so expensive?
Curry?
No, that comes
Turmeric.
that comes from, never mind.
Sounds
anyway, it can be used. It can be used to flavor and season things, in addition to its medicinal properties. But I put that around there to see if I could get some of the swelling down. And we got up the next morning, and I took it off, and I kept saying to my husband, if there's the first sign of infection, emergency room. I got up the next morning, that flap of skin was perfectly aligned back where it should have been. Ooh. There was one little pinprick open on the side of it where there was excess water coming out of it, but it had sealed itself back down there. There was no sign of infection. And we continued. We put the salve on it. We soaked it. We used the tea tree on it. Never once did it show a sign of infection. And you can barely see the scar today. And my husband says to me, see, if I'd gone and had stitches, the wound would have been closed with stuff inside of it. Right. It wouldn't have been cleaned the same way that the body cleaned it. And it healed. And he'll show you his, I was going to say, I think it's this finger, but I'm not sure. It may very well be his index finger. I think it's his index finger that he did. But he will show you. You can't see the scar.
I think that's so fascinating. But you know, I'm also thinking, while we're having this conversation, this is something that should be carried into the veterinarian office as well.
I have seen, Rosemary has stories about similar experiences that she has done with her dogs. She has several dogs, and times when they have been injured or when they have been ill, injuries specifically, using poultices of healing herbs. Plantain, you familiar with that? You've probably pulled it out of your garden.
I'd love to eat that. Is that the part? Is that the one that grows on the ground?
No. This is plantain has sort of round leaves, and it has real skinny stalks, seed stalks that come up through the. If you've ever tried to create a new lawn, it's the first plant that will arrive when you.
Now I know.
It's a wonderful herb for drawing things out. If you have a splinter, it will literally draw the splinter out of the tissue. It will draw infection out of a wound.
I can remember my mother. Oh my goodness, we're going way back now. She had a little black salve that they used to rub
that
on
would
something.
that would draw like that. It may very well have had plantain in it. There's a number of other herbs that go into that black salve, but you can use plantain just by yourself, just on its own. And so she would make poultices with plantain and put them on the dog's wounds to draw out the infection and to promote healing.
Well, I'm just thinking, do you know what an Elizabethan collar is? Those torturous devices that go on dogs or cats after surgery so they can't get at the stitches. And it's, oh my God, I can't imagine having an itch or something hurts that you can't touch it or do something. But I was just thinking we should really talk more about creating something to go over the stitches, over the sutures, to relieve the itching, the pain, and also promote healing.
Well, I actually, and it's one of the classes that I teach, have a very basic herbal salve that I go out into my yard in the summertime and harvest specific plants, and I figure that they're going to need to work together in the salve, so I'm going to start them out working together early, and I bring them in. I let them dry, wilt overnight in a basket, and then I chop them up quite finely and let them dry mix them all together and let them just sit there in the basket for another day or so, and then put them into olive oil and let them sit for several weeks in olive oil. Put them out in the sun, let the sun warm it, and the properties of them are infused into the olive oil, and then I thicken that up with beeswax. I actually add a couple of other oils in addition to olive oil. And some essential oils. I put in some lavender because that will calm the inflammation and the itch, and the tea tree because it will be antibacterial. Geranium will stimulate the growth of new cells, and then it's all in a salve that you can put on that's very soothing and for animal. It would work for animals. There's nothing in it that would hurt you if you licked it. You know, if you take some of it internally. In fact, I've been known to use it on some of my dogs. Scrapes and scratches.
Do you have a book? Do you have anything where this is all written down?
Do I have a book? I have a whole drawer full of handouts from different classes that I've taught, where I have recipes and suggestions, and maybe someday it'll come together in a book. There are lots of books.
We're getting told 5 minutes again. I can't believe how quickly this goes speaking with you.
There are in relation to books, look for books by Rosemary Gladstar. She has some really practical ideas about humans and animal health. And if you look when the student is ready, the teacher appears. You know, walk through the section in the health section in the bookstore, or Google them online. Look on Amazon. Amazon is a great place to buy them because you can buy them used. You know, and then you've got somebody else's notes written in the margins. Those are always neat to see.
Well, tell me about the community gardens at the Healing Center.
The community garden is an effort to, again, give people hands-on practical experience to help them identify plants. It's a joint effort with the UVM Master Gardeners Program. We're an approved site, so they can get credit for coming and working there. We grow, it's anchored with perennial herbs, but we add annuals in the springtime. And it basically gives people a chance to be able to recognize the herbs. I think that connection between the plant and the remedy, what the plant looks like, and what the remedy looks like is really important, because otherwise we tend to look at herbal medicine the same way we look at pharmaceuticals that we pull off the shelf in the drugstore. That we don't make the connection that this is something that's growing right outside my door. This is something that is simple and natural. And so having somebody be able to see what a valerian plant looks like, or elecampane, or Joe Pye weed, or just some of the common ones, the peppermint, the thyme, lavender, echinacea. We have an abundance. And then the garden sits in a plot that was at one time a private residence, but it's about an acre, and it has an amazing abundance of native Vermont plants that have healing properties.
I would love to visit in the summer. And do a show
I'd
there.
offer herb walks from time to time, and then as part of the herb walks, I just go through and pick leaves and flowers and berries and whatever, and put them into a pot and create tea that is a unique tea. You'll never taste it again, because you'll never get the same mix of ingredients. It's just whatever happens to be there. That always seems to people really like that. They like to see that.
And are there, just in closing, are there plants that grow locally that you don't want to touch? Well, I know nettle, but you also don't.
Well,
my girlfriend in Connecticut encourages nettle. It's like, are you kidding me?
I do too. Nettles are a great plant, and in fact, if you work with nettles, you can get they don't sting you when you pick them. As hard as that is to imagine, but there's one plant that grows in this area that if you eat it, take it internally, not knowing what it is, has a potential for killing you.
What is that?
And that is water hemlock.
Don't know that.
And it's of the same family that Queen Anne's lace is. If you're out in an unfamiliar area where you see something that looks like Queen Anne's lace and you think it is, but you're not quite sure, plant members of that family, unless you're really, really sure of their identification, it's best to avoid those. But there are other plants that will make you uncomfortable, make you not feel well. But there's nothing
ingesting, not just
from
touching.
ingesting,
Okay.
not just touching. No, the poison ivy, poison parsnip. Those are things that will irritate your skin.
Okay.
And mushrooms.
Oh,
Mushrooms are a whole other topic.
I know.
I
dying
know.
to ask you.
I know enough to know not to do mushrooms without someone who knows a whole lot more than I do.
I have a friend who's also on BVSA's board, Susan Fleming, who is expert in mushrooms, and when she comes over with the mushrooms, but I do know I can take puffballs that grow in my lawn and cut them and grill them, and they're great. Anyway, again, we could keep going on and on.
We could.
And I thank you so much for doing our shows with us, and let's do something in the summertime. I'd love to come and see your gardens.
I would love to have you.
Okay.
Thank you, Sue.
And thank you for watching For the Animals, and please join us. And if you'd like any more information about the herbs or the classes that Sylvia has, we'll make sure we put it on the screen. But you can also go to our website, vvsahs.org, and click on For the Animals and watch any of our shows. Okay, thank you very much, and please join us again next week.
At dusk, there came a turning. There was a moment when all was known. You could feel beauty rising on the breeze that shapes the stone. And I would ride upon the breeze that shapes the stone across the sky.